the invitation initially came to me via Tatui Contemporary Gallery here in Auckland, East Auckland. They were contacted by Art Angel in the UK to respond to the World Weather Network project. So Tatui, as a local host for a number of projects, invited a few artists to propose. So the Weather Choir was one that I proposed, and the idea of setting up a collective of participants that would represent coastal communities that are under some sort of duress with climate, if not directly, at least kind of symbolically. And so the idea was to try and get a representation of locations that gave, in a sense, a bit of a circle of the Southern Pacific. And then the idea was that the choir, as such, with remote locations, with making recordings regular as conditions permit, these would go up onto a website, and that the actual representation of the choir as such would be experienced by anybody visiting the site and being able to play individually or together the different recordings. Yeah.
I'm Jana Vinneren. I am at the moment sitting in my studio close to the largest lake in Norway. And when I was a child, it was about to die from algae overgrowth. And it was our drinking water, was about to die. No fish could live there, in that sense. So when I was invited to work with around the Baltic Sea, which I have had, for since also I was a young person, that it was dead, and that it was no fish there, and I have been actually back there recording several times before, but then this was an opportunity to go deeper into understanding this about dead zones. And what's happening when you have an algae overgrowth and when you have a hypoxic water and not enough oxygen to sustain life underwater. And then when we were out, we just saw this rowing stadium that's sort of from the sea point of view. We saw this kind of tribune that was there, and it looked really beautiful sight. And I was saying to Paolo, like, look at that, that this is perfect for our project, because we were also looking for sites for the actual installation. And then we had a 14-channel sound installation that I was then composing a lot in the studio before, in my studio here, which is where I'm sitting, and preparing for the time before, this year before. And then went there and worked with the existing sounds in that environment, the lapping of the water, the sound of the trees, and it was rainstorms at times, and all of this became part of the composition. And this is, the weather would change every day, so it needed to be something that could work together with the sounds there. And also with the human created sounds of the ferries that were passed, or the people, on their paddle boats or the rowing boats, but and all the engine sounds became part of the composition of the whole, what people would be listening to there. So it was my idea, calling it and listening through the dead zones, because close to many coasts in the world we have these dead zones, because there are too much nutrition, too much like sewage, too much fertilizers and runoffs from land that will make the algae grow too much, and then you have the cyanobacteria taking over and then using all the oxygen. So this is a common and growing problem along the coast of many cities and public, areas in the world. So I thought you can sit there and listening through these empty areas underwater to areas that are very much alive and that have intense and good and well healthy biodiversity, which sounds a lot, you know, because like schools of fish that are really audible, you know, and the call from a pilot whale, you know, for example, and it all composed into the composition that became that piece that people could sit there and listen to.
Actually, my name is Sherko Abbas. I am a Kurdish Iraqi artist, and my work is kind of my main things is about the archive. I'm concentrating about the archive. I use archive in my work a lot, and in order to understand so the situation or the contemporary Iraqi at the moment, how these things going and come. Yeah, and yeah, I work with sound and footage, and I make objects sometimes, and I work with the text. I have been chosen by Ru'ya Foundation, which is the organization in Iraq, and working. It's a kind of charity organization working in Iraq, and also they, I think, it's created 3 times Venice Biennale and Iraqi pavilion. So when I have been told by Tamara Chalabi, who's the chair of the organization, told me there is a project about the climate. I never worked about the climate at that time. So they told me there is about this climate change, and also we are involved in, do you have any idea or do you have any things like a proposal to send it to me if you can do anything regarding this matter? So the first time I saw this, the information, how this project, what's the importance about the climate in Iraq, especially, and where is the main things to find it in about the rivers, because we have 2 famous rivers. And the first thing I came to my mind is about the raft, which is I have this some information about it. That in the old time in Kurdistan, in the north of Iraq, they use it to trade between the Thals. They send things with the raft, which is made, it is a very specific, like a wood, and also they put this kind of, they use animal organs. I don't know what's the name in English, but so they transport that they wood and they some stuff from the north to Mosul, and after that to the south of Iraq. So this kind of very interesting about, for me. And also I used, I knew about some that use it for the political things. The raft as well is used, for example, transforming the soldiers in north of Iraq, and especially by the opposition of the Saddam Hussein's regime. So they used in this 2 kind of stuff. And my project is trying to not talk about the politics and either economy. I just wanted to celebrate the cultural aspect of the water. So that's why I brought this raft, which is never used for the culture. They only use for trade and for the politic situation. So I just interested to bring it and put it in this kind of stuff, and collecting sounds, the sound of weather, and also the stories of the people. It's a kind of celebration of the rivers, our celebration of the climate change, or the anything, rather to talk about it critically, or in the critical point of view. I think that's the idea, to bring this raft and the floating the station.
I mean, as a metaphor, it's essentially to do with either harmonies or dissonance. And when we think of vibration, it's a universal law. I mean, everything vibrates visibly or invisibly in proportions of harmony or dissonance. And if we think as an example, climate, you know, is on the big scale, and the effects of climate, you know, are the small scale that we experience. You know, that's the whether it's geological or tectonic or climate change as we're experiencing it. I mean, these things are all things that are experienced by the species as humans, and harmonics. I think when you take the idea of a vibrating string that's moved by the wind, it's a soft but significant metaphor for the changes between harmony and dissonance. So when the weather's calm and everything's sweet and we're all happy with the way things are going, the laminar flow produces beautiful strings of harmonics that are in consonance. The first 16 in the series. That's basically our musical scale, the harmonic scale. When things get a little bit dissonant and wild with the weather, the harps scream, and they literally scream, and it's like an alarm bell. And to me, that is, it's just a symbol. It's only symbolic. But as a body of responses coming from different parts of the South Pacific, it makes up a pretty powerful response, I think, just to on that. As I say, it's a fairly soft response, but it's still drawing attention, I think, to the variabilities of weather, and what we do with it is the big question for humanity anyway.
Sure. Yeah, actually, I wanted to put these two kind of sound in conversation together. For example, how the sound of weather impacted the people from living the both off side of the rivers. So, and how this sound of people now, that the culture in general created it by whom, and how this tell us the importance of the river. Because when I am talking about the climate change, for example, there is too many good and very inspiring project about to give us the data and the things that is important to wake up and, for example, to let us know what will be happening in the future. But my project actually, it was very different in this kind, because I wanted to celebrate and rather to tell what's happening in the future. But I am trying to tell why this river is important for this area, for example. If they disappear, what else is disappear as well,
I think that, we are all the time orientating ourselves to sound in our daily life, and I think, as soon as there would be no sounds outside, if there was no birds, there would be no humans or nothing to be heard, you would really start to notice and be very quite disorientated. And I have once been in an anechoic chamber where there is no sound reflecting, not even your own sound is having anything to reflect to, and it's actually quite scary. So we are very much all the time orientating ourselves to sound, but we are not really talking about it so much, but if you close your eyes and you're standing outside somewhere, you really start to kind of hear what is like really far away, what is passing you, what is really close, somebody passing you get a lot of information that you don't get by just seeing. If you look at like an image of a place, it is very it's framed, it's 2 dimensions, while when you close your eyes, you start to almost, you sense the world all around you in 3 dimensions. So I think we are just not so used to kind of point towards that, but we are definitely orientating ourselves to it, and so does the creatures underwater a lot. So that's I'm very concerned with when we are coming in with these massive engines, and sonars, military sonars, or just our little boat with the engine on, you know, or shipping lanes. These are masking the sounds for the fish, so that the fish cannot hear each other anymore. You know, crustaceans cannot hear each other anymore, and mammals, like different species of whales that calls really long distances, cannot mate anymore, you know, because we are kind of making all this sound between. So, you know, we are not so used to listening underwater, but all the sounds in the compositions are recordings from underwater. I use hydrophones at different depths, and with different types of hydrophones that will pick up different parts of the frequency spectrum. And I like to be, you know, as detailed and audible as possible for the different species that you can hear. But we are not so used to listen to them, you know, because our ears are not very well adapted to listen underwater. But we can kind of sense the sound, and we can listen with bone conduction. And we can also use, you know, I'm sure people, you know, that are sailing or rowing, they have heard sounds and the crackling of the crustaceans, or, you know, the whale songs, and also the grunts of fish in the belly of your boat. You know, I know that people know what I'm talking about then. And but we have not just talked about it so much, but it's becoming more and more known. So I'm very glad for that people are getting to know more and more about that. Actually, there is a rich and really fantastic audio, I call it, landscape underwater.
I didn't directly talk about the climate change because I believe nowadays when you are asking the local people about the climate change, they have like a ready-made answer, like something pre-thinking answer that's created by everyone, media and TV. That's why I avoided to ask this question, because I knew what's the answer. Yeah, the water is gone, and we need to find our life. We have to fishing. We have to do. We have to. That's why I try to avoid this question, because you know the media nowadays is destroyed everything. They give us the answer. That's why I try to go and find the answer differently, and that's why I try to do some conversation with the fisherman, not about the level of water and the. Of course, all of them, when the first start, I heard everything from the TV. So, but after our conversation, and we talk about, for example, there is a type of fish in Iraq. Even I didn't know about it. When I found that, I was very fascinated about this idea. There's a type of fish, it's called the jerry. I don't know what's in its English. And the fish was, for example, avoided by a specific group in Iraq, because the Iraq, they have a Shia and Sunni, the two kind of believe in Islam. So one of them, they are eating this fish, and the other is not eating it. So I didn't know what's the reason. And so I asked why this, because there's another, it's a holy person in Shia, it's called Ali. And when they go to pray, and this fish is like make it, the water is not clean. So he said this is not, for example, right to eat. That's why all these communities not eating this kind of fish. And also this kind of, they ask about, no, some other fishermen, they know that, yeah, that's right, they Ali said these things about this kind of fish. So that's why. And they have a kind of because it's living in the clean water, and the clean water is created something, for example, the fish can hold this kind of poison inside itself. That's what. So from this point, we are going to talking about the climate, because all the water is poisoning at the moment, and this is kind of bring this fish is very difficult to find at the moment, because of the water is, we can't find it sweet water or clean water. So in this kind of conversation is happening between me and the fishermen, but not specifically asked. Because they told me, everyone, you are going, oh, the water is dried here, and there is no water here, and the water is very less, and the big fish, we can't find it. But yeah, we are in somehow familiar with this kind of question. Yeah, that's in general.
No, I think that first of all is the awareness of these environments, and I have seen that people have started to listen more to other creatures, like the birds just outside your window, and when you go outside you start to notice more through the sound, even the sound of movement, that you hear something rattling in a tree and you pay attention to it, and who is it, and you become curious. And I have seen people been thinking more and acting towards that throughout the years. And also some people coming to me, it's like, Jana, I was listening, I was swimming and I heard this crackling. It was just like on one of your releases, So I was like, yeah, that is different types of crustaceans. So people start to notice because they're becoming, they have heard it before, and then it's easier to recognize in the wild, when you hear it yourself. So I think maybe this awareness that can help, and hopefully also that sometimes the people can have a relaxing time, also enjoying the listening experience of the compositions, that they are just having a moment where they can also relax a bit.
In actual fact, climate change is not a science and technology solution. It's actually what we have to change is our behavior. And what this project does is get people to behave in a specific way. They're funny things. They're very sensitive instruments to set up. I mean, it's kind of all right for Philly. He's been in sound art for 2 or 3 decades or something, but they're sort of fiddly, and they rely on the strings to push the bridge against the base of the bucket or the tin or whatever you're using, and against the piece of wood that covers over the other end. And so you have to fiddle around with them and get them in the sweet spot and all of this sort of thing. Meanwhile, the wind could be blowing, it might be really bloody hot, or it could be raining, it could be anything. So they're very sensitively pitched to receive input and vibration from the wind, and then to then be attempting to capture that with the audio, and that in itself is a good thing, to observe this sort of sense. And then to be honest, there's even a little bit there's a little bit of silliness about it. It's kind of like, what am I doing? I'm standing on a hilltop and I've got this tripod structure, and that won't do what I want to do, and all of that stuff. But it's the ethics. We've got to change our ethics and our practice and our sense of culture. Yeah.
Our tripod here sits, we're on a hill above Whakatane, and half of Whakatane can see it, and I'm getting asked all the time, what is that on your front lawn? So I'm constantly talking about it to people, even though people I don't know, because they just know that we're at that house on the hill. So it does serve to to be a beacon for the subject. And Pasha's right, the instrument, it is an instrument, it's not a scientific instrument, but it is an instrument, and it is difficult to get working. And I think the idea of a weather choir is a really beautiful poetic idea about capturing what is going on at the moment, and that is for me, that's the power of this project. It's a multi-geographical choir singing towards a changing future.